Chapter 1. The Workhouse. England. Oliver Twist is 9 years old. He has got blonde hair and big, sad blue eyes. He is sad because he hasn't got a mum and he hasn't got a dad. Oliver is an orphan. He lives in a workhouse in a town near London, and he hasn't got any friends. The workhouse is a bad place to live because it is very cold and dark. There are a lot of orphans in the workhouse, and they don't receive a lot of food. All the orphans are sad and hungry. They have porridge every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They don't like porridge, but one day they are very hungry, so they want Oliver to ask for more porridge. "We are hungry, Oliver," they say. "You must ask for more porridge." Oliver is afraid, but he is very hungry too. He takes his porridge bowl and walks slowly to the front of the dining hall. Oliver doesn't want to ask for more porridge, but the other children push him forward. The hall is silent as Oliver walks to the front. He goes to the big table where the master of the workhouse is having his dinner and quietly asks him for some more porridge. "Please, sir, can I have some more?" asks Oliver. The master is very angry. He stops eating his chicken and potatoes and stands up. "More?" he shouts. "No, you cannot." The master thinks that Oliver is a bad boy, and he calls for Mr. Bumble. Mr. Bumble is a very important man. He is very angry and agrees with the master. "Oliver Twist, you are a bad boy," he says. He throws Oliver in a cold, dark room and locks the door. Poor Oliver stays in the cold, dark room for many days. He is so cold that he can't sleep, and he is very hungry. The master doesn't give him porridge for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In fact, sometimes he doesn't give Oliver any porridge. Oliver is very tired and thin, and he is very lonely because he hasn't got anyone to talk to. Oliver cries every day. After 1 week, Mr. Bumble goes to the workhouse. He goes to the cold, dark room and unlocks the door. Oliver is sitting in the corner of the room. He is very white. "Get up!" shouts Mr. Bumble. Oliver stands up and runs to the door. "You must leave the workhouse," says Mr. Bumble. Mr. Bumble wants Oliver to leave the workhouse immediately, so he speaks to Mr. Sowerberry. "Mr. Sowerberry," says Mr. Bumble, "here is £5. I want you to take Oliver Twist to live with you. He can work in your shop." Mr. Sowerberry agrees, but not because he is a kind man. He wants Oliver to work very hard in his shop. "Come with me, Oliver," he says. "I have got a lot of work for you to do." Poor Oliver. He doesn't want to live with Mr. Sowerberry, but he must leave the workhouse. He hasn't got any clothes or toys to take with him to Mr. Sowerberry's house. It is grey and rainy when he leaves the workhouse, and the other orphans don't say goodbye to him. Mr. Sowerberry lives with his wife, Mrs. Sowerberry. Mrs. Sowerberry is fat and ugly, and she has got a horrible, mean face. She doesn't like Oliver. She is making a big dinner when he arrives, She is cooking beef and carrots, but she doesn't make any dinner for Oliver.
"There is no dinner for you,"
says Mrs. Sowerberry.
"You are a bad boy, so you can eat with the dog."
Mrs. Sowerberry's dog is a big black dog. It eats all the food, and so there is nothing for Oliver. Oliver is hungry and tired. He wants to go to sleep, but Mrs. Sowerberry doesn't give him a bed.
"We haven't got a bed for you,"
says Mrs. Sowerberry.
"You must sleep on the floor."
Oliver goes to sleep on the cold, hard floor. He is very sad. The next day, Oliver meets Noah in the kitchen. Noah works in Mr. Sowerberry's shop. He is a big boy, and he has got a horrible, mean face too. He doesn't like Oliver, and he says horrible things about Oliver's mother.
"Your mother didn't love you,"
he says to Oliver. Oliver didn't know his mother, but he is sure she loved him. Oliver is angry.
"My mother did love me,"
he shouts.
"No, she didn't,"
shouts Noah.
"Stop it! Be quiet!"
shouts Oliver. But Noah continues to say horrible things. Oliver becomes angrier and angrier. Suddenly, he hits Noah on the head, and then Noah hits him on the nose. The two boys start to fight, and they make a lot of noise. Mrs. Sowerberry hears the noise. She runs into the kitchen and sees Oliver and Noah fighting on the floor.
"Stop fighting immediately!"
she shouts. Oliver and Noah stand up. Mrs. Sowerberry doesn't like Oliver, but she likes Noah.
"Come here, Noah,"
she says.
"Are you okay?"
Noah runs to Mrs. Sowerberry. He tells her that he has got a headache because Oliver hit him on the head a lot of times.
"I don't know why Oliver hit me so many times. My head hurts,"
says Noah. Mrs. Sowerberry is furious. Oliver tells Mrs. Sowerberry that Noah said horrible things about his mother, but she doesn't listen to him. She throws him in a cold, dark room. She closes the door, but she forgets to lock it. Oliver stays in the room for many hours. It is very late, and the house is silent. Mr. and Mrs. Sowerberry are asleep. Oliver doesn't know what to do. He didn't like the workhouse, and he doesn't like Mr. and Mrs. Sowerberry and Noah. Then, he has an idea. He decides to run away. He slowly opens the door to the room and quietly walks to the kitchen. Then, he opens the kitchen window and jumps out into the street. But he doesn't know where to go. He can see the church and the bakers and the butchers in the town centre. Then he sees a big road. He runs down the road away from the town and Mr. Sowerberry's shop and the workhouse. Chapter 2. A New Family. Oliver runs down the road for a long time, but after 2 hours he stops to sleep under an enormous tree in a field. Oliver sleeps for a long time, and when he wakes up, the sun is shining, and he can see the big road in front of him. It is a very long road, and there are no houses. Oliver doesn't know where to go. Then, next to the tree, he sees a sign for London.
"London,"
thinks Oliver.
"What a great city!"
Oliver decides to go to the city of London, and so he starts to walk down the road again, but he is very tired. He hasn't got any food or water.
"I'm thirsty," says Oliver, "and my stomach is empty."
He doesn't feel well, and he sits down on the road opposite the London sign. Oliver is thinking about what to do, when suddenly someone says,
"Hello, what are you doing here, sitting on the road?"
Oliver looks up and sees a small boy wearing a black hat and a long purple coat. The boy is smiling.
"Hello," says Oliver. "I'm thinking. I don't know where to go, and I'm very hungry and thirsty." "Stop thinking and come with me," says the boy. "My name's Jack, but all my friends call me Dodger."
Oliver tells Dodger his name and says that he wants to go to London. Dodger has got a lot of friends in London. He lives with his friends, and he says that Oliver can live with them. Oliver is very happy, and together they walk to the city. Dodger takes Oliver to a big old house. It is in a very dirty and smelly street. They open the green front door and walk up a lot of stairs. There is a room at the top of the stairs, and there are a lot of boys in the room. All the boys are laughing and shouting, and standing in the middle of them is an old man with long red hair and a long red beard. The old man turns to look at Oliver when he walks into the room, and he smiles.
"Welcome, my dear," he says. "My name is Fagin, and these are my boys. We are your new family."
All of the boys are playing with coloured handkerchiefs. Oliver plays with them, and he is very good. He can take the handkerchief out of Fagin's pocket without the old man seeing him. Oliver and the other boys play the handkerchief game a lot. Fagin has a lot of beautiful handkerchiefs in many different colours. He has got red, yellow, blue, green, orange and pink handkerchiefs, and he keeps them in a special box. He has also got a lot of watches and jewellery in his special box. One day, Oliver sees Fagin put all the things in his box and then hide it under his bed. Fagin is very angry when he sees Oliver watching him.
"Oliver!"
shouts Fagin.
"You must not tell anyone what is in my special box."
Oliver agrees not to tell anyone, but he thinks that it is very strange that a rich man like Fagin lives in a big old house in a dirty and smelly street. The next day, Fagin sends Oliver to the market with Dodger and another boy called Charlie. Oliver is happy to leave the house. He doesn't like staying at home with Fagin when the other boys go out. The three boys walk around the market and look at all the food. There are people selling fruit, vegetables, fish and meat. The boys are hungry, but they haven't got any money to buy anything. They leave the market square and go to the shops. There is a big bookshop with a lot of books outside. There is a rich gentleman looking at the books. He has got a handkerchief in his pocket. Dodger points at the man.
"Look at that man,"
he says to Charlie and Oliver.
"He has got a beautiful yellow handkerchief."
Dodger walks near the rich gentleman and quickly and quietly takes his handkerchief from his pocket. Dodger is very happy, but a moment later the man cannot find his handkerchief and shouts, "Stop, thief!" Dodger and Charlie run away, but Oliver doesn't know what to do. The man points at Oliver and shouts, "There he is! Here's the thief!" Oliver starts to run, but it is too late. A policeman arrives, and he takes Oliver to the police station. Oliver is very scared, because the policeman wants to put him in prison. But then another man arrives. "This boy is not the thief," he says to the rich gentleman. "I work in the bookshop, and I saw a different boy take your handkerchief." The rich gentleman, who is called Mr. Brownlow, looks at Oliver. "In fact," he thinks, "this boy does not have the face of a thief. I think he is a good boy." Mr. Brownlow is very sorry and asks Oliver his name. "My name is Oliver Twist," says Oliver. "And where are your parents, Oliver?" asks Mr. Brownlow kindly. Oliver tells Mr. Brownlow that he doesn't have a mum or a dad. Mr. Brownlow thinks that this is terrible, and he decides to ask Oliver to live with him and his housekeeper, Mrs. Bedwin. "Do you want to come and live in my house with me and Mrs. Bedwin?" Mr. Brownlow asks Oliver. "Yes, please, sir," says Oliver. "Thank you." They get into Mr. Brownlow's carriage and they go to his house in the centre of London. Mr. Brownlow lives in a big house in a very nice street. Mrs. Bedwin opens the front door and then takes Oliver immediately to the kitchen. She is a very kind lady, and she makes him a big dinner. Oliver eats chicken soup and bread, meat and potatoes, and a big piece of cake. But after dinner, he falls asleep. Mr. Bedwin and Mr. Brownlow take Oliver upstairs to his bedroom. It is a beautiful bedroom with a big bed. Oliver sleeps all night and all the next day. When he wakes up, he goes into the living room. There is a big painting on the wall. The painting is of a young woman with long blonde hair and big blue eyes. Oliver looks at the painting for a very long time. Chapter 3. The Big House. Oliver is very happy at Mr. Brownlow's, but Fagin is not happy. In fact, Fagin is furious. He wants Oliver at his house. He calls for Bill Sikes. Bill is a nasty, horrible man who works with Fagin. He has got a dog called Bullseye.
"Bill, you must find Oliver immediately," says Fagin.
Fagin doesn't want Oliver to tell the police about the handkerchiefs and his special box. Fagin and Bill do not want to go to prison. Bill and his girlfriend Nancy go into the city centre to search for Oliver. They don't find Oliver the first time, so they go again and again and again. Then, one day, they see him. Oliver is wearing very nice clothes, and he has got some books and £5 in his hand. In fact, Oliver is going to the bookshop for Mr. Brownlow. Bill and Nancy immediately run to him.
"Oliver!"
shouts Nancy.
"My little brother Oliver!"
"I'm not your brother," says Oliver.
"Come on,"
says Bill.
"Come home with us."
"No," shouts Oliver. "I'm not your brother. I live with Mr. Brownlow." Nancy and Bill don't listen to Oliver, and they take his arm and pull him down the street.
"Help!"
shouts Oliver, but nobody helps him. Everyone thinks that Bill and Nancy are his brother and sister. Bill and Nancy take Oliver back to Fagin's. Fagin is very happy, but Mr. Brownlow is very sad. He doesn't know where Oliver is, and thinks that he took the £5 to run away. After a few weeks, Fagin goes to visit Bill. He wants him to steal money and jewellery from a big house where rich people live. He must go to the house at night and enter through a small window, but Bill is too big. He has an idea.
"Oliver is smaller than me," says Bill. "He must come with me."
Bill sends Nancy to Fagin's to get Oliver. Nancy loves Bill, but she is very kind. She wants to help Oliver.
"You must be a good boy," she tells Oliver. "Bill is a very dangerous man. I want to help you, but you must wait."
Oliver is scared. Bill has got a pistol, and he takes Oliver out into the dark, cold night with his friend Toby. They walk for a long time, and then they stop in front of a big house. Bill tells Oliver that he must enter the house through the small window and then open the front door for him and Toby. Oliver knows that they want to steal things from the house, and he doesn't want to go in. But Bill points the pistol at his head. Oliver enters the house, and he wants to shout to the people who live there, but he doesn't have time. One of the servants hears Oliver in the house, and he shoots him with a pistol. Oliver's arm hurts, and there is a lot of blood.
"Come here!"
shouts Bill. Oliver is scared and runs back to the window. Bill and Toby pull him out of the window, and they start to run away. But Oliver is losing a lot of blood, and he can't run. Bill and Toby don't want to go to prison, so they leave Oliver in the road. He stays there all night. In the morning, his arm hurts a lot, and he doesn't know what to do. He starts to walk down the road, and when he sees a house, he knocks on the door. 2 servants answer the door.
"Look," says one of the servants. "It is the thief from last night."
Oliver doesn't say anything. He is very sick and falls to the ground. The servants take him into the house. The house belongs to Mrs. Maylie, and she lives there with her niece, Rose. Rose is 17 years old and very beautiful, with kind blue eyes and a gentle smile. They tell the servants to put Oliver in a bedroom and then to go and get the doctor. Mrs. Maylie and Rose don't know that the thief is a young boy. When Dr. Losberne arrives, he goes upstairs to see Oliver. He spends a long time with him and listens to his sad story. Mrs. Maylie and Rose wait in the living room. They are having a cup of tea when Dr. Losberne comes back downstairs. He looks very sad. "The thief upstairs is a young boy," he tells them. "He has got no family, and a group of thieves took him away from a kind man called Mr. Brownlow." Mrs. Maylie and Rose are very sorry to hear this story. They go and talk to Oliver, and he tells them about the workhouse, Fagin, and Mr. Brownlow. They decide to ask Oliver to live with them.
"Would you like to live here with us, Oliver?"
asks Mrs. Maylie. Mrs. Maylie and Rose have kind faces, and Oliver likes them. "Yes," he says. "Thank you." Oliver is happy to live in the big house, but he is very sick and must stay in bed for many days. He has got a very nice bedroom and lots of toys. Every day, Rose goes to his room to read him a story. "Which story would you like me to read today?" says Rose. "The one about the prince and the dragon," says Oliver. He loves that story, and he loves Rose. But he often thinks about Mr. Brownlow and Mrs. Bedwin, and then he is sad. Finally, Oliver is better and gets up out of bed. He gets dressed, washes his face, combs his hair, and puts on his new clothes. Oliver has got new brown trousers, a white shirt, a grey jumper, and black boots. He is very handsome in his new clothes. After a few weeks, Mrs. Maylie and Rose take Oliver to their house in the countryside. It is a small cottage with a beautiful garden. There are a lot of flowers and trees in the garden, and Oliver loves playing outside. He plays football and hide-and-seek, and one day Rose gives him a bicycle. "Here you are, Oliver," she says. "This is a present for you." Oliver is very excited. He loves his bicycle, and he rides it every day. Oliver loves living in the countryside. But one night, when he is in bed, he sees a face at the window. "Oh no!" shouts Oliver. "It's Fagin!" The servants go and look outside, but they can't see anyone. Oliver is very scared. He is sure that it was Fagin. Chapter 4. A Secret Brother. Fagin is very angry that Oliver isn't living with him anymore. He wants Oliver to be a thief and work for him. He goes to visit a man called Monks. Monks is tall and thin, with a mean face. He is also very angry when Fagin tells him that Oliver is not living with him.
"Oliver must live with you, Fagin," shouts Monks. "He must be a thief."
Monks decides to go and find Mr. Bumble. He is sure that he has got some important information about Oliver. He goes to the town where Oliver was born, and in fact he soon finds the man he is looking for. Mr. Bumble is now married to the woman who was at the workhouse when Oliver's mother went there. Mrs. Bumble has got some things that belonged to Oliver's mother. She agrees to sell them to Monks for £25. Monks gives her the money, and she gives him a gold locket and a wedding ring. Monks looks at the locket and the ring, and then he walks to the river. It is a cold, windy night, and it is raining. Monks is wearing a long black coat and a big black hat. He looks around, and when he is sure that nobody is watching him, he throws the locket and the ring into the dirty water. Then he quickly walks away and goes to meet Fagin. Nancy is also at Fagin's house, but she is asleep on the sofa when Monks arrives. Monks and Fagin go upstairs. After a few minutes, Nancy wakes up, and she hears them talking about Oliver. They know where he is, and they want to do bad things to him. Nancy decides that she must help Oliver. She goes home, but the next day, when Bill falls asleep, she leaves the house and goes to the centre of London. She goes to a big hotel and tells the receptionist that she would like to see Rose Maylie. At first, the man doesn't want to call Rose because Nancy does not look like a nice young lady. She is wearing very old clothes, and they are dirty. But Nancy tells him that it is very important.
"I must see Miss Maylie," says Nancy. "I must speak to her about Oliver."
The man agrees, and he takes Nancy to Rose's room. Rose is sitting on a chair reading, but she stands up when she sees Nancy.
"Hello,"
she says.
"How can I help you?"
Nancy immediately starts to cry.
"I must tell you about Fagin and a man called Monks," she says. "They want to hurt Oliver."
Rose gives Nancy a handkerchief, and then she asks her to tell her everything she knows.
"Fagin is a bad man who uses young boys to steal things from rich people," says Nancy. "And now he wants to kill Oliver."
"He wants to kill Oliver?" says Rose, who is very white.
"Yes, and so does his brother Monks."
Nancy tells Rose that Oliver has got a secret half-brother called Monks.
He doesn't like Oliver, and he wanted Fagin to make him a thief, because thieves go to prison, and sometimes they die in prison, or sometimes they're hanged, she says.
Rose is very scared, but she wants to help Nancy. She offers her some money so that she can run away from Fagin and Bill Sykes, but Nancy doesn't take it.
No, thank you, she says. It is too late for me, but you must save Oliver. You must find a good man who can help you.
Nancy then tells Rose that she can find her on London Bridge every Sunday night between 11 o'clock and midnight.
When you need any help, come and find me, she says.
Rose thanks her, and then Nancy quickly leaves the hotel so that she can get home before Bill wakes up. Rose starts to think about what Nancy said about finding a good man to help her and Oliver.
Who can help us? She says.
Then, suddenly, Oliver comes running into the room. He is very excited.
Rose! Rose! He shouts. I saw Mr. Brownlow in the street before.
In fact, Rose and Oliver left the cottage in the countryside and returned to London so that he could look for the gentleman who was so kind to him. Oliver walked around the city centre every day looking for Mr. Brownlow's house, and now, finally, he knew where to find him.
Please, can we go and visit him immediately? Asks Oliver. Yes, of course, says Rose.
Oliver wants to tell Mr. Brownlow about what happened with Bill and Nancy, and that he didn't run away with his £5. And Rose wants to talk to him about Fagin and Monks. Rose puts on her coat and calls for her carriage. Mr. Brownlow's house is very close to the hotel, and 10 minutes later they stop outside his front door. Oliver jumps out of the carriage and runs to the door. He knocks very loudly, and when Mrs. Bedwin answers, he throws his arms around her and gives her a big hug.
Oh, Oliver, she says, my dear Oliver.
She is so happy that she starts to cry and immediately welcomes Oliver and Rose into the house. Mr. Brownlow is sitting in the library, but when he hears all the noise, he goes out into the hallway. He cannot believe his eyes when he sees Oliver standing there.
My dear boy, he shouts, I can't believe you're here again. What a wonderful surprise.
Mrs. Bedwin prepares a delicious afternoon tea with lots of cakes and biscuits, and everyone chats happily together for a long time. After her tea, Rose asks to speak to Mr. Brownlow alone. They leave Oliver and Mrs. Bedwin talking in the kitchen together, and they go to the library. Mr. Brownlow immediately sees that Rose is worried about something.
What's wrong, Miss Maylie? He asks. It's Oliver, she says. He's in terrible danger.
Rose then tells Mr. Brownlow all about Monks and Fagin and their plan to hurt him.
We must stop them, says Mr. Brownlow angrily. How can we find them?
Rose tells him about Nancy and says that she is the only person who can help them. Mr. Brownlow and Rose agree to go to London Bridge on Sunday night at 11 o'clock to wait for her. Chapter 5. Poor Nancy. Nancy is at home with Bill, who is very sick. It is Sunday night, and she wants to go out, but he says that she can't.
You cannot go out, Nancy,
shouts Bill.
It is very late, and you must stay here with me. I only want to go for a walk, Bill, says Nancy.
But Bill is very angry and will not listen. Nancy looks at her watch. It is 11:30, and she wants to go and wait on London Bridge for Rose, but she can't. Bill doesn't fall asleep, and at midnight Nancy takes off her coat and hat. She sits down, and her face is very sad. Fagin, who is also at Bill's house, thinks that it is very strange that Nancy wants to go out, and that she is sad because she can't. He decides to watch her carefully in the next few days. The following Sunday, when Bill is in bed, Nancy very quietly leaves the house. She walks down the dark London alleys and then turns right towards the river and the bridge. It is 1:45 when she arrives, and Rose is waiting for her. Mr. Brownlow is with Rose, and he smiles when he sees Nancy. "Hello, miss," he says. "My name is Mr. Brownlow, and I am a friend of Oliver's." Nancy is very scared, and she looks around many times before she speaks, but she doesn't see the small boy hiding under the bridge. "Hello, Mr. Brownlow. Hello, Miss Maylie," she says. "I must be quick, because I do not want Bill to wake up and see that I'm not in the house." She then tells them everything she knows about Fagin and Monks. Nancy tells them where to find Monks, but she doesn't tell them anything about Bill. She knows that Bill is a bad man, but she loves him, and she doesn't want him to go to prison. After a few minutes, she says goodbye to Rose and Mr. Brownlow. They are very sad, because they want to help Nancy, but she only wants them to help Oliver. "Don't worry about me," she says. "Help Oliver." Then she walks away over the bridge and goes back home. Bill is waiting for her when she gets in. He is furious. "Why did you go out, Nancy?" he shouts angrily. "Why?" Nancy tells him that she went for a walk, but he doesn't believe her. "Fagin sent one of his boys to follow you," he shouts. "I know that you told that man and woman about us." Nancy tells Bill that she didn't tell them anything about him, but he doesn't listen. "It's not true," he shouts. "You are a liar." "I'm not. I didn't tell them anything," says Nancy. "I love you, Bill. I don't want you to go to prison." But Bill still doesn't listen. In fact, he becomes angrier and angrier, and he hits poor Nancy very hard. He hits her a lot of times, and after a few minutes, she falls to the ground. Bill looks at her and tries to wake her up, but she doesn't move. Nancy is dead. Bill is scared now and knows that he must leave his house before the police come. He calls his dog Bullseye, and they go out into the cold, dark night. They leave the city and walk to the countryside, but Bill hasn't got any friends there, and he doesn't know where to go. He knows that he must hide somewhere, but he can't think of a good place. He decides to go to the woods and stay there for a few days. Back in London, everybody is talking about poor Nancy, and the police are looking for Bill. Mr. Brownlow and Miss Maylie hear about the murder, and they too are sure that it was Bill who killed her. "Poor Nancy," says Rose. "She was so scared of that horrible man, Bill Sykes." "Yes, she was," agrees Mr. Brownlow. "We must find Monks before something terrible happens to Oliver." Rose agrees, and Mr. Brownlow decides to go to the address that Nancy gave them. He asks Dr. Losburn and another friend to go with him to the hotel where Monks is staying. They take Mr. Brownlow's carriage and drive to the bad side of the city. The hotel is in a small, dark street, and there is no reception. When they arrive, they go upstairs to Monks's room, but they don't knock on the door. The door is open, and when they walk into the room, Monks is sitting on the bed. Monks is very surprised, but he doesn't have time to run away. Mr. Brownlow and his friends pull him off the bed, out of the room, down the stairs, out into the street, and then into the carriage.
"Stop it!" shouts Monks. "Where are you taking me?"
"You are coming to my house," says Mr. Brownlow. When they arrive at Mr. Brownlow's house, they take Monks into the living room. He immediately sees the painting of the young woman with long blonde hair and big blue eyes.
"Agnes," he says.
"Yes," says Mr. Brownlow. "That is Agnes, Oliver's mother. And Oliver is your half-brother."
"No, it's not true,"
says Monks.
"I don't have a brother."
"Don't lie," says Mr. Brownlow. "Your father, Edwin, was my best friend. Your mother was older than him, and they weren't happy together, so she left. She took you to live in a different country, and then your father met Agnes. He was very happy with Agnes, and they wanted to get married."
"I know,"
says Monks. "Unfortunately, your father died when he went to Italy to collect a lot of inheritance money, and he did not marry Agnes before Oliver was born," continues Mr. Brownlow. "Poor Agnes went to the workhouse, and she died immediately after she had Oliver." Mr. Brownlow then tells Monks that he knows that he stole the money that Oliver's father left him, and that he wanted Fagin to make Oliver a thief so that he could never ask for the money. Monks then confesses that he took Agnes's wedding ring and locket so that Oliver could not find out who his mother was, but he says that he didn't want Nancy to die.
"I'm sorry,"
says Monks. Mr. Brownlow can see that he's sorry, but says that he must make things better with Oliver. Chapter 6. The End of the Story. Bill is still in the countryside, but he must go back to the city. He hasn't got anything to eat or drink, and he is very hungry and thirsty. It is early in the morning when he leaves the woods, and Bullseye is asleep, but he wakes up and follows Bill. Bill looks at the dog who is now walking next to him. It is always with Bill, every time he goes out. Suddenly, Bill stops walking.
"When people see Bullseye, they know that I'm nearby," thinks Bill. "He can't stay with me, because I don't want the police to see him and then to look for me."
He picks up a big rock to throw at the dog's head, but Bullseye is too quick. He runs away and hides in the woods. Bill is angry.
"Stupid dog!"
he shouts and throws the rock into the trees. But Bill hasn't got time to look for Bullseye. He must get back to London and speak to Fagin. He is sure that he can find him a good place to hide from the police, but when he arrives in the city, Fagin is not there. Fagin is in prison, and so is Dodger. The police are looking for all of Fagin's boys and all the people who worked with him.
"Oh no," says Bill. "Where can I hide?"
It is late now, and Bill, who is wearing a scarf around his face, walks down the dark London alleys. He goes to a house where he knows his friend Toby is hiding. He knocks on the door, but when Toby opens it, he is not happy to see Bill.
"What do you want?"
he says.
"I want to hide here with you," says Bill.
Toby is scared of Bill, and he agrees to let him in the house. When Bill walks into the living room, he is very surprised to see Bullseye there.
Stupid dog, he says.
Bullseye runs away and hides under a chair. Charlie is sitting on the chair, but he stands up when he sees Bill.
"What are you doing here?"
he shouts angrily.
"We don't want to help you. You killed poor Nancy." "Shut up," shouts Bill. "No," shouts Charlie. "I'm not scared of you."
Then they all hear a lot of noise in the street outside. It is a large group of angry people, and they want Bill. They saw Bullseye in the street in the afternoon, and knew that Bill was probably back in the city. They start shouting.
"Come out, Bill Sykes! You killed Nancy, and now you must go to prison!"
Bill is very scared, and he looks at Toby and Charlie.
"I don't want to go to prison," he says. "I must escape. Help me."
"No," says Charlie, and then he starts to shout to the people in the street.
"Bill Sykes is in here!"
he shouts.
"Come and get him!"
Bill runs out of the living room and up the stairs. Bullseye follows him. Bill has got a rope, and he decides to go onto the roof of the house. He wants to climb across a lot of house roofs and then run away, far away from London. He must be careful on the roof, because he doesn't want to fall. He starts to put the rope around his waist, but suddenly, in his head, he sees a picture of Nancy dead on the floor.
"Nancy!"
he shouts, and then he loses his balance and falls. The rope goes around his neck, and he dies. The police arrive, and they take Bill and Bullseye away, but Toby and Charlie escape. Toby runs away from London, and nobody sees him again. But Charlie, who never wanted to be a thief, decides to become a farmer. He leaves the city and goes to the countryside. He walks for many days, and at night he sleeps in the fields. But one day he sees a big farmhouse on top of a hill. Charlie walks to the top of the hill and knocks on the door. The farmhouse belongs to a kind old man and his wife. They give him a job on the farm, and he gets up early every day to feed the pigs and collect the chickens' eggs. He learns to ride a horse and drive a tractor, and he is very happy. He never goes back to London. Fagin dies in prison. He is very sad and lonely because he hasn't got his special box with all his beautiful handkerchiefs and expensive jewellery.
"Where are all my beautiful things?"
he asks, but nobody answers him. He is alone in his prison cell, waiting to be hanged. Mr. Brownlow takes Oliver to visit Fagin one day. Oliver knows that he is a bad man, but he feels very sad when he sees him. Dodger is in a different cell because he decided to give the police a lot of information to help them catch Fagin. He stays in prison for a long time, but he doesn't die. He makes friends with some other boys, and they play a lot of different games together in their cells. Now that Bill and Fagin are dead, Monks hasn't got any friends in London to help him. He wants to leave the city, but first Mr. Brownlow wants him to sign a document. "You must sign this document, Monks," he says. The document says that Monks must give Oliver all their father's money. Monks agrees to sign because he doesn't want to go to prison. "Okay," he says. "Give me a pen." Monks signs the document, but Oliver, who is a kind boy, tells Mr. Brownlow to give him some money so that he can start a new life in another country. Monks takes the money and leaves London immediately. Oliver never sees him again, and he dies a few years later in a foreign prison. Oliver goes to live with Mr. Brownlow and Mrs. Bedwin. Mr. Brownlow adopts him, and they are a very happy family. One day, Rose goes to visit them. Mr. Brownlow invites Rose to sit down on the sofa in the living room, but she stops in front of the painting of the woman with long blonde hair and big blue eyes.
Mr. Brownlow, she says, this is a picture of my sister Agnes. Why do you have this painting in your living room?
Agnes was Oliver's mother, says Mr. Brownlow. Mr. Brownlow is very happy, and he immediately calls Oliver. "Oliver, come quickly," shouts Mr. Brownlow. "Rose is your aunt." Lucky Oliver. Now he has got a father and an aunt. Rose is also very happy, because she didn't know much about her family. She was very young when her father died, and she went to live with some people in the countryside. She never saw Agnes again, but she always remembered her face. The people she lived with were not very nice to her, but then she met Mrs. Maylie and went to live with her. Mrs. Maylie has a son, Harry, who is in love with Rose. Harry asks Rose to marry him, and she is so happy now that she knows about her family that she agrees. There is a big wedding in the summer, and Rose wears a beautiful white dress and has lots of flowers in her hair. Mr. Brownlow, Mrs. Bedwin, and Oliver all go to the wedding, and they have a fantastic time, dancing and singing together. After the wedding, they decide to go and live in the countryside near Mrs. Maylie and Rose and her husband, so that they can see each other all of the time. They buy a beautiful big house.
"I love this house," says Oliver. "It has got a big living room and 6 bedrooms, but best of all, it's got an enormous garden."
Oliver plays in the garden every afternoon, and he teaches Mr. Brownlow how to ride the bicycle that Rose gave him. Every evening, Mrs. Bedwin makes a delicious dinner, and they all sit around the table together, laughing and eating. After dinner, Mr. Brownlow and Oliver go to the library, and Mr. Brownlow reads Oliver all of his favourite bedtime stories. Oliver is not a poor orphan anymore. In fact, he is a very rich, very happy, very loved little boy.